Hello to everyone who's joined us today. It's good to see that you've been interacting a little bit on our chat. I am Jihna, and I am the president for University Services and the Student Advice Center at Studee. Really excited to share this webinar today with Craig Riggs. Craig is the editor for ICEF Monitor. Let's kick off our webinar then. In the recent years, the international higher education sector has become a lot more competitive. More countries, cities, and institutions are looking for attention from prospective international students. However, one nation has stood out from the rest, and that is the US. That's why today we're looking at how your university can emulate the success of the world's top study abroad destination.
The U.S. has long established itself as a leading destination in the world for international students, and particularly with respect to quality of higher education and the reputation of U.S. higher education, that standing is that's a very strong foundation for their market position even today. But that said, there's no doubt that the last 4 years have been a very challenging time for international recruitment in the US. 2020 obviously was a difficult year everywhere, but even before COVID, the US lead among top destinations had been eroding for some years. There used to be a very significant separation between the US and the UK as the number one and number two study destinations in the world. There was US and UK, and then there was everybody else. Um, but over the last 5 to 7 years, especially, we've seen Australia and Canada close that gap quite a bit. And China, Germany, France, Russia, Japan have all solidified their positions among the top 10 destinations globally. Basically, a top line indicator of enrollment in US higher education over the last several decades. And you can see that at the end of that line, as we get up to 2019-20, it's starting to flatten out and even curl downwards a little bit. So foreign enrollment in the US actually fell by, marginally, but it fell by 2% in 2019-20. And to put that in context, that's the first decline in foreign enrollment in the US for almost 20 years at that point. But more importantly, it follows 2 previous years of really marginal growth in the US. And then, of course, came the presidential election of 2016. The Trump administration spent most of its time in office making a series of really difficult policy decisions and sending a number of really challenging market signals. The Muslim travel ban, restrictions on Chinese scholars, rising trade tensions with China, and reform, both sort of threatened and actual reforms of some of the key programs that are relevant to international students, including the H-1B working visa and the optional practical training program. The Biden presidency takes off the table some of the things that international students and agents and other international partners in the world were concerned about when they thought about the US, especially the prospect of a more restrictive environment around post-study work rights and settlement options for international students and international graduates of US degree programs. And I think that we can expect that that alone will have a huge impact on the attractiveness of the US for that key Indian market, for example, but also for other really important emerging markets in South Asia and Latin America and Africa. And so, the US has all of that historical strength that Jihna described earlier. And as I say, it remains very much the world's leading destination. But I think there's a room for fresh optimism, even in a more competitive environment, about how the US can expect to attract international students in the years to come. Things that make the US less attractive to some students would be the affordability issue that we talked about earlier. There's a greater emphasis on affordability, certainly in the marketplace today, for all the reasons that we've been discussing. And so that's a big consideration. When we look at student research, it's very clear that even before the pandemic, that affordability question was a huge factor in student decision making in terms of whether to go to the US or to go to somewhere else. Um, Safety is another big issue in the US. And so there's a lot of attention globally to gun culture and just that aspect of personal safety and violence in the US that is certainly concerning for students and their parents. And so that just anecdotally in my observation but we see it in student research as well, is a factor that discourages students, or more to the point, encourages them to look at other destinations. Um, and in the pandemic context, the public health response in the US is not seen as favorably around the world as has been the response of other destinations.
Thank you to everyone who attended. We really look forward to our next webinar, which will take place now in April. And we're looking at imagining a university life in the post-COVID world. Will university life will ever be normal again? Thank you and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.